Hakeem with AutoFix Pal. Today we are working on a 2012 Nissan Rogue, and the customer is complaining about a noise when driving over 30 miles per hour on the highway or any road. Grinding noise, groaning noise. They don't like it. So we verified the complaint. It is making a noise, and it does sound like a wheel bearing. So we put the car in the air, got our mechanic stethoscope out, put it up to the right front wheel bearing, and we can hear some graggly growling and all types of stupid stuff going on with that right front wheel bearing. So we're going to swap that right front wheel bearing out, make this customer happy, and get this car back on the road as soon as possible. So watch the video, learn something. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Now, while I was busy running my mouth, you missed me removing the wheel speed sensor wire from the strut. Now we are removing the retaining bracket for the brake line. Well, the retaining clip that keeps the brake line, the brake hose, attached to the strut. So what you want to do is just take your flathead screwdriver in there and just twist and just pry it out. Use it like a lever, twist it out, spin it out, just like you see me do it in the video. It's not as easy. I make it look easy, I know, but that's the way you got to do it. Or you can hit it out with a hammer. You can bang that little clip out. You can do it either way. I like to just put my screwdriver in there and twist it out. But either way you want to do it works just fine. Alright, so next we're going to take out the axle nut. I think that's what I'm about to do. Let's see. Yeah, I'm about to take out the axle nut. You got to take the cotter pin out, spin it around so you can get to that cotter pin. Bend the thing up and then smack it out from the side. Use your dikes, diagonal cutters. Dikes for short. And just pull them out. Pull that cotter pin out. Take that 32mm nut out of there. And you know what? I'm gonna stop talking, and I'm gonna put some instructions on the screen, because when I play music, it just makes for a better video. You guys don't want to hear my voice the entire video, do you? Alright, so let's play some music, put the instructions on the screen, and if there's something that I really need to point out, I'll come back on. Alright, just a quick note. In the video you see me pulling back on the brake caliper. That's because I'm trying to push the piston back, the caliper piston back, so that when I'm going back together I can slip the brake pads, the calipers. Just the way I took it off, I can slip it back together in the same manner. If I just wedged it back with a screwdriver and forced it off, it'll be difficult for me to put it back together, because there'll still be some tension there, and the brake pads will probably slide a little bit, and it just won't go back together smoothly. So before you pull that caliper off, make sure you pull back on it a little bit, just so you can get some of the pressure off of the brake pads, and you can easily put it back together when it's time to. Alright, so sometimes the axle comes right out of the bearing / knuckle without you having to use any force, like an air hammer or a regular hammer, and sometimes they don't. Like this instance right here, you're gonna need an air hammer. That's what I'm using right there, an air hammer. If you don't have an air hammer available to you, what I suggest is that you put the nut, make sure you have a new nut around somewhere, because you're probably gonna ruin the nut. Put the nut on the end of the axle and beat on the tip of the nut instead of the tip of the axle, because if you beat on the tip of the axle to try and get the axle through that knuckle, you're going to end up destroying that axle tip, and you're gonna make this job a lot more difficult if you destroy the tip of that axle. So don't beat on the axle directly. Always use an air hammer with a center punch so you can punch into that dimple of the axle, or put your axle nut on the end of the axle and then beat that through that way. But just make sure you have a new nut available, because you will end up destroying the end of that nut. So that's all I got for that. Okay, so now we are going to attempt to remove the wheel speed sensor. And I say attempt because you got like a 50-50 chance of getting that thing out without breaking it. A lot of times the wheel speed sensors, they just get seized in there and they don't want to come out. Sometimes you break the bolt that's holding it in, and wheel speed sensor removal can be tricky. It's usually a dicey situation. But if we can't get it out, and we did not get it out successfully, there's another way you can do it. You can just bend that metal dust shield back that's on the back of the bearing, and you'll see me do it in the video. You can bend that back a little bit, and then that gives you the room to get past the wheel speed sensor without breaking the tip off and causing any more damage and more headache. So just watch the video, and you'll see me bend that little shield back right there. Put the bolt back into the bearing. You want to screw it in maybe 3 or 4 threads. You want to leave all of the bolts loose. You don't want to take them all the way out. You want to leave them in maybe 3 or 4 threads, because what you're going to do is use the bolts to hammer the bearing out of the knuckle. You'll see in a second I'm going to take the air hammer and hit the bolts directly in the center of the bolts with the air hammer. What this does, it keeps the wheel bearing intact. Because a lot of times if you take it out through the front, you'll end up destroying the bearing, and you won't really know if the bearing is bad. I mean, I'm pretty sure the bearing is bad because I listened to it and I know it was bad. But this just gives you further evidence that the bearing is bad. Once you take it out, you can spin it and you can hear the noise. And when you beat it out that way, by the back of the bolts, instead of beating it out on the flange, what the heck is the name that they call that thing? Whatever, the wheel flange, the front of the bearing, if you beat it out that way, then you'll end up destroying the bearing and you'll never know if it was bad. But if you beat it out through the back using the bolts, the bearing will be intact, and you can spin the bearing and you can actually physically hear the bearing making the extra noise, and you can show that to your customer and say, look, see, this bearing is bad, blah blah blah, X, Y, and Z. And you can send it back to your parts warranty and not have any issues. Not that they will give you any issues with the warranty bearing, they never do, but you know, that's just another way to get the bearing out without destroying it completely. Alright, so when you're tightening the 21mm knuckle to strut bolts, make sure you have forward pressure being pushed in on the knuckle, as you see me doing in the video, while you're tightening it, so that it's tightened in the most camber negative position, which is pushed in, and that'll make sure that your alignment angles are correct. Well, as it'll make sure that your alignment angles were the same way they were before you took it apart, and you won't have to do an alignment. You shouldn't have to do an alignment anyway, because that doesn't give you that much movement, but it gives you enough movement where you should be pushing forward on it and tighten it up in the just do the way I did it in the video. Now make sure you're paying attention when you put that brake hose back into that retaining bracket that's on the strut. That retaining bracket is keyed, the brake hose is keyed as well, so make sure that the keys line up and that everything fits in there properly. Otherwise you're not going to be able to get that retaining clip right there in my hand. You're not going to be able to get that to slide into the slot, and you'll have a hard time beating it in.